Hello students, welcome to Extra Marks. Today we are going to talk about this very interesting, very important and very easy, plus it is scoring. And this is a topic that is natural sources, and in that you will be talking about air and water pollution. So let's go ahead and explore more about this topic. So the contents that we are going to cover in this session are air, what are the resources on the earth. Then we'll talk about the role of air in managing the atmosphere and role of air in the climate change. Then we'll talk about air pollution and different consequences of human activities in that. And then we'll be talking about water as a resource, and then we'll be talking about water pollution and different issues related with them. Alright, so I'm sure you're as excited as I am to explore more about this topic. So let's go ahead and find out. So today we will be able to describe what natural resources mean. So first we'll talk about air and then we'll talk about water, right? So we'll be talking about air and then we'll be talking about water. So let's go ahead and talk more about it, right? So we have only one home, and that is Earth, right? So all the resources that we utilize are in plenty, like they're enough to satisfy anyone's need, but they're not enough to satisfy everyone's greed or anyone's greed, right? So there is enough on this planet to, provide for everyone's need, to meet their needs, but there's not enough to provide for anyone's greed, right? So if we are using all these natural resources without thinking about what is going to happen to the coming generations, then it is going to lead to a disaster, right? And all the resources are going to get exhausted, right? So we should be respectful about these things. And where do all these things come from? So basically it is coming from the solar energy, right? So all these resources are a product of the energy that is transferred from the sun to the plants, and then different things happen, and you'll understand what I mean in the sessions, right? So let's go ahead and explore more about the resources. So before we explore more, I would like to know and understand how much do you know about natural resources? Like, are there any natural resources that you're aware of? I'm giving you 5 seconds and you can share your answer, right? So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and 0, right? So some of the natural resources that you might have thought about would be air, right? And how air is a resource. So anything that could be utilized or that has some utility or functionality that makes your life easier and simpler is known as a resource. Other resource that you know, because we are studying today, that is water. So we'll be talking about these two natural resources, right? Air and water, right? So let's go ahead. So different resources that we know, as I said, come from the solar energy, right? So you can look at the picture and then share what are the different resources that you can see. And the hint is also that is solar energy or the solar light that you get, the light of the sun that you get on the planet, are also a kind of a resource or not, right? So take 5 more seconds and share your answer. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and 0. So the various resources that you can see over here in this picture are rivers, and we can say the water. You can also say that it's the solar energy. Yes, that's a resource. Nowadays, we know that a lot of countries are planning to shift, especially France wants to shift to solar energy to meet its daily energy requirements, right? And then we also have wind, right? The wind also, you can hope that it's over there. Then there are plants. Are plants also resource? Yes, they are also a natural resource. And flowers, right? Or you can say plants in general, so they fall in one category. Okay, then there are some animals also, right? There must be some fishes in the water that is flowing, right? So if you can overall think about how we can divide these natural resources into 2 categories, right? If I have all these natural resources, but there are so many and I want to divide them into 2 categories, can you imagine, can you think of what 2 categories could be formed? Right? Let's give you 5 seconds and then I'll tell you exactly what scientists do. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and 0. let's go ahead. Okay, so we'll be talking about it in some time, right? So resources on, just keep it with you, but we'll be talking about it, don't worry, just keep that thing with you. So resources on earth, as you can see, we are talking about water, right? Land. So earth is how much water? As you can see that 3/4 of the earth is water, that is approximately around 75%. Okay, I'll say approximately around 75% of earth is water, right? And then the left 1/4, that is around 25%, and in other words you can say 1/4 is land, right? Although we have so much water available, but then again there is some scarcity of drinking water. Less than 1%, or you can say 0.1% water is actually the water that is fresh and is available for drinking purpose, right? So that is the reason why there is water scarcity naturally. But again, as I said, there is enough to meet the needs of the people of this planet, but not the greed, right? We'll see how. Right, so these are certain resources, that is water and land. Land, of course, is another resource. So is water, right? So land also provides a lot of things needed for our daily life, right? To make our lives, improve our lives, the quality of the life better, right? So land also provides fuel, it provides plants, it provides a place for us to live, right? So it's also an important resource. Okay, so now let's move from here and talk about the components. So as I had, asked you to think of different categories in which scientists would have divided all the natural resources into, right? So we call them components of the biosphere. Okay, so what is biosphere? Let me first explain that to you on this slide. So basically, we have this land, okay? The land part is known as lithosphere, right? So lithosphere is basically, lithos word is basically coming from stone, and that is why the place which deals with the land is known as the lithosphere, okay? The sphere of the land. Okay, then the water sphere is your hydrosphere, or the sphere of the water, right? And this light blanket, okay, a very thin layer like a blanket that is present around the earth is known as the atmosphere, okay, or the sphere of the earth. So that is your atmosphere. Now, when all these spheres, right, they have some living and some non-living components. Where these all living components interact with each other and also with the non-living components, that's known as the biosphere. That is the sphere of the living, okay? And as you know, there are living beings in the water, in the land, and also in the air, right? So that means biosphere is encompassing all these different spheres, right? So coming back to the components of the biosphere, and I'm sure now you are able to arrive at the two categories that I asked you to. So the scientists, they divide all these natural resources into biotic and abiotic. Okay, so the word bio means life or living, right? So biotic basically deals with the living world, okay, or the living, okay, and abiotic is dealing with inanimate or non-living. Okay, so when we saw that picture in which we found out that there are certain fishes, there are some trees, they all form the biotic component of the biosphere, right? And the abiotic components are air, water, and soil, right? So this is what you need to know. So the scientists divided the resources into biotic and abiotic, right? So these are basically the components of the ecosystem as well. Okay, so ecosystem can be divided into two, biotic and abiotic, which is already written. So remember that. Okay, let's go ahead from here. The breath of life, air. So why is air so important? I just want you to think, right? Think over this, reflect, and then share why do you think that air is so important? What will happen if air is not there? So we are covering air first because air is one of the most important component required for our survival, right? We can stay without water for a few hours, we can stay without food for a few days, but without air, a few minutes, right? So that is why air is so important. And as we are aware, right, because of many reasons, there is a lot of pollution in the air, right? and which is actually leading to a very poor quality of life. So let's find out. So life is possible on Earth because of the unique composition of the atmosphere, right? Different planets like Mercury, Venus, Mars also have an atmosphere, but the composition is different. They have a higher composition of carbon dioxide or methane like gases in comparison to Earth, where oxygen is in abundance, and that is what we breathe in, right? So life is possible because of this unique composition of our atmosphere. Then eukaryotic organisms, right? So organisms that have got a well-defined nucleus in their cell need this oxygen that is present in our atmosphere to break down the food and release energy, right? And carbon dioxide, which is also present in the atmosphere, is utilized by the plants in the process of photosynthesis that gives us oxygen and also the food. Alright, and dissolved carbon dioxide is again utilized by the marine animals that live in the water for their life, right? And also to make their shells, right? So these are all things, some of the things, like a list having some of the things why air is so important for the survival on the planet, right? So let's go ahead and talk about the role of atmosphere in climate control, right? So air has an important role in maintaining or regulating the atmospheres or the climate of your place. Okay, how is that possible? Now, question is air an insulator or conductor? So, insulator is the one that stops the that does not conduct the temperature or the electrical signals. But an insulator is the one, the conductor is the one that conducts the heat and the electricity, but insulator does not, right? So what do you think, is air an insulator of heat? Yes or no? Well, air is not an insulator, right? So I'll just write no over here, right? Air does not conduct heat, so it's a poor conductor or an insulator in other words. So it maintains and regulates the temperature of the earth. How? So we have seen from the previous slide that we have earth. Earth has a blanket, right? Not exactly blanket, I mean a layer or a cover of the atmosphere. Now this regulates whatever heat comes from the sun, right? It regulates whatever heat that comes from the sun is actually trapped by certain gases which are also known as greenhouse gases. Okay, so they trap the solar energy which is reflected back from the earth atmosphere. Otherwise, if these gases are not there, then the atmosphere of earth is going to be really cool, right? It might just be inhospitable. Okay, now to compare that, to understand that, moon is also near to the earth and it also gets the similar solar heat, right, or solar energy, but the temperature is much lower in comparison to the earth, right? So that means the importance of atmosphere is much, and because of the atmosphere the temperature is hospitable and life is possible, right? And at night it slows down the escape of the heat. Yes, at night the heat escape slows down. I hope this is clear that how the atmosphere is actually helping us regulate the temperature of the earth. Let's go ahead and talk about what is moving air. So air is stationary, but when it starts to move, it's called as wind. So moving air is wind. So now why is the air moving? And when a large mass of the air is moving, it's given a special name, that's air current, which we'll be discussing in some time. So because of the unequal heating of two surfaces, the air starts moving, and that's called wind. Okay, so there is a difference in how the land and the water gets heated. Okay, so land has this peculiar property that it gets heated up very quickly, and similarly it gets cooled down quickly. Okay, whereas water, it takes some more time to get heated or to get it cooled down, right? So there is a difference in how the water and lands get heated. Okay, so whenever there is the land gets heated first during this daytime, right? The land gets heated first, whereas the water, it is cooler. You must have seen that water is cooler at times, but the land is hot, right? So what happens is that the air molecules above the land, they get heated up also, and they start rising upwards, right? And when they start rising upwards, it's actually moving, and it tends to move in the upward direction. So the area above the land, it becomes like a vacuum, right? There are no air molecules present over there. Now to fill that empty space, the air from the adjoining cooler region starts moving to that place at a high speed, right? So this is what causes the movement of the air called wind, right? So that is why we say the differential heating of different surfaces like land and water causes the movement of the air, right? So what causes the movement of the air? Now I want you to think for 5 seconds and share your answer. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and 0. Yes, in simple words you can say that the differential heating of two surfaces like land and water is what that causes the heating of the air, and that is what leads to the movement of the air. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk about something known as air currents. Okay, so air currents is basically like if you see a flag, right? It flutters, right? It moves because of the wind, right? It moves because of the wind. Now, wind currents that are making it move, they have a particular direction. Like right now we established that the air was moving from the cooler water towards the land, right? And we can definitely find out using a wind pane or any other equipment that helps us to find out which side the air is moving, right? So air currents are very important in deciding the temperature or the climate of different regions of the world, right? So now let's talk a little bit about water cycle. So very simply, first thing what we note is that there is a water body, right? So the water body gets heated because of the solar energy, right? So again the water starts rising up, right? Now when it rises up, it reaches a certain point where the water starts to condense, right? So the water droplet starts becoming bigger. Now at this point, if they find a particle on which these droplets can actually condense, which is also known as the nucleus, right? So it's called a nucleus. On that particle, they start condensing, and this is how the clouds are formed. Okay, now these clouds, they move towards the land, right? Where at a higher altitude, okay, the water droplets, they come down, right? So again we see is what is known as condensation, right? And then it falls on the ground, and then this water flows back to the water body, right? So this is in short a water cycle and how the water is coming back to the water body, so, right? So we know that there is evaporation and also there is condensation. Okay, so let's move from here and talk about another important phenomena that takes place because of the differential heating of the surfaces, and that's called breeze. Okay, so during the daytime what happens, as we have discussed, the land, okay, so the land gets heated fast. Lands get heated. What happens? The air molecules in touch with the land, they rise up. Okay, so they are rising up. Now they start, now what happens is to fill that empty space or fill that vacuum, air from the sea, right? It starts to move towards the land. Now this is called as sea breeze, as it is coming from the sea, right? And it's cool, so it's very pleasant. Reverse happen during the night time. Just because the lands get heated quickly, land also gets cooled down quickly as well. So now, in comparison to that is land, in comparison to the land, the water of the sea is warm. So that means that the air molecules which are in touch with the warm water are going to rise up, okay? And now what is going to happen? The air from the land is going to move towards the sea to fill that empty space in the air, right? And now this is known as the land breeze because it is flowing from the land towards the sea. I hope this is clear. And now you know why it is happening if you have understood the phenomena, the science behind the movement of the air. Okay, now climate is also responsible on a global scale. Many features, for example, the Himalayas that we have are actually protecting India from becoming very cold, right? So that is one of the thing, and the other reason is rotation of the earth, right? So earth also rotates, and that what causes the movement of the currents, right? The wind currents, and that also leads to the movement of the water currents, and these all factors combined together regulates the climate of a region. Okay. Now, we have already discussed the water cycle. So, a quick recap. So, we have seen that the water from the water body, it gets evaporated, and then we need a nucleus, right? So, important thing or a new thing that you must have seen this time is a nucleus on which all these water droplets, they come together, formation of the cloud takes place, and then the water from the clouds, they condense, and again it comes back to the water body, right? So, this is your water cycle. Now, we'll be talking about ozone layer. Okay, so our atmosphere has different layers, the troposphere and the stratosphere, the mesosphere, the thermosphere and the exosphere. So, we will not be going into detail of the layers of the atmosphere, but what we are going to talk about is the ozone layer, which is present in the stratosphere. So, first thing that you notice in which we live, that layer of the atmosphere is known as troposphere. Okay. The layer in which the ozone layer is present is the stratosphere. Okay. Now, this layer of the ozone is very thin, okay, and it is equally very important, right? Why? Because ozone is acting like a protective shield around the planet, and this shield is basically protecting you from the harmful UV rays. Okay. Now, UV rays also have their different types, but we're not going to go into that detail. We are just going to talk about that UV rays are basically going to be affecting your skin in different ways. It may cause people cancer. It might cause cataracts. Okay, it might cause cataracts or skin cancer. So, these are certain things that UV rays can do to human health, and many other innumerable things it can do. It can cause damage, okay, to the life and to the non-living things as well. So, what the ozone layer does is that it protects the life on the planet, right? So, what is the formula of ozone? So, oxygen we say is O2, ozone is O3, right? How it is formed, these are all things which will require us to, study it in more detail. But as of now, we are going to just understand that ozone is O3 and it is protecting the people, the life on the planet by acting like a protective shield, right? So, this is getting affected because of a lot of human activities. For example, unregulated emission of pollution from the chimneys of factories and also from thermal power plants. Okay, so thermal power plants, which are basically based on coal, right? So they cause maximum amount of pollution. Then comes vehicles or other things which cause air pollution, right? So the air pollution that we are causing is basically leading to a lot of harmful gases that is affecting the very delicate atmosphere layer around the earth, right? It's very delicate and it gets really affected by a little bit change in its composition. Okay. So, ozone layer has been increasing. So, in the year 1979, you cannot see it. The purple dot that you see is expanding. It's becoming bigger and bigger. Although at times there are good news that the ozone layer is actually closing down, or the ozone hole is actually closing down. This is basically ozone hole. And another thing that I want you to understand that the gases that are causing them damage are known as CFC, or chlorofluorocarbons. Okay, so they basically go and affect the ozone layer by reacting with them, okay, and cause the ozone hole. So this is one of the consequences of how human activities are basically leading to degradation of the atmosphere and ultimately the quality of life. Okay, now I have a question for you to think. So there are two places, right, in the same state. One part of the state, you see that there is a theme park, water park, right, where people go, they have so much fun, so much water they spend, they have a luxurious life in a 5-star, right, they have a jacuzzi. And in the same state, there are farmers, right, which do not get enough water, okay, enough water to even drink, enough water to give to their cattle, enough water to give to their farmlands, right? So that means what is happening? So water, which is a very important natural resource, it's leading to revenue, it's leading to food, right? But in this case, what is happening? The water as a natural resource is not being properly handled, right? Life will not be possible without the food, right? But it is possible without the theme parks, okay? So that is why the natural resource, that is water, it should be properly distributed. It should properly be given to the people who need it more and then utilized for other entertainment purposes. So that is one thing that you should understand. Now I'll show you another one. Water. So yes, as now we are going to talk about water, which is also known as a wonder liquid. Right. So how much is the composition of the water? What part of the water, like how many quarters of the earth is water? It is 3/4. That is 3/4 of the earth is water, whereas 1/4 of the earth is land, right? So it is an important resource. Now, as we've discussed, even though there is so much water, but that's not enough, right? Because the available drinking fresh water is less, okay? So role of water in the human body. So we know that so many activities like the plants and we need water to keep ourselves hydrated. But what is actually water doing? So water is basically 90%, 70 to 80% of your body, okay? And it regulates your body temperature, right? Then a lot of parts of your body, they are maintained because of the water, right? And the muscles, they consist, for example, the muscles, they consist 75% of the water. A lot of metabolic activities in the body occur because of the water, right? So water is also known as a universal solvent, okay? Now, so water in human body we have understood. Water in plant's body also helps to maintain its shape and structure. Also it helps in the processes like photosynthesis that leads to the production of oxygen and food, and that is what makes life possible on the planet. Let's move from here and talk a little bit more about water, which is 3/4, right? So as we have discussed, only very less percentage of water is actually available, right? So around the water that is there, 97% is found in the ocean. Only 3% is fresh water. Now out of this 3%, most of it is trapped in the glaciers. Okay, that means it is in the frozen form, and that's around 79%. And then 29% of it is in groundwater, and even less than that is actually available in your rivers and lakes. So understanding all the scenario that how much water is actually available, the first question that comes is how much water out of the total water is fresh water? Now you need to find out and share the answer, okay? Next is, where is most of the water found? Most of the water is found in the, okay, and also talk about where most of the fresh water is found. What are the main sources of water, like drinking water for you? Then why we cannot drink the water directly from the sea? The answers are simple. 3/4 of the earth is actually made of the water. Only 3% of the total water is actually fresh water. And most of the water is frozen in the glaciers, in the ice caps, in the glaciers and the ice caps, right? Only waters in the rivers and groundwater and lakes can be used for actual drinking. Seawater is unfit for drinking or other purposes because of the presence of salts in it, right? So it cannot be utilized for many things, okay? So why we cannot drink water from rivers and lakes directly? Do you know? So all that water that is available, right? So less water of all that water is actually available for drinking in the rivers and the lakes, but still we cannot use this water because of some human activities. So can you think of what are these human activities which are actually leading to these problems? Okay, so I want you to share, right? So you can do it like causes and effects. So there are certain causes that are leading to the scarcity of water that is available. That means of all the water that is available in lakes and rivers, this water is again made more scarce because of the pollution, right? A lot of rivers and lakes are drying up because of the different human activities and also some natural reasons. But because of the different human activities, we are expediting or speeding up the process of making water even a more scarcer resource. All right. Okay. So some of the reasons that are leading to it, you can think in your head and share. what are the causes and what could be the effects. Okay, so you can also think of different things that you have observed, you have seen around, and then you can share your answer. You must have thought of the things. So I'm giving you 5 more seconds to synthesize the answer. Even if you're not able to share, just keep your answers in your mind. Okay, so 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 and 0. Let's come here. So some of the causes are throwing of garbage. Okay, so there is a lot of garbage that is thrown into the river bodies like Yamuna, right? That leads to the high level of ammonia and different types of gases, which makes the water unfit for drinking or any other work, right? So water becomes unsafe for drinking. Then there is sewage, which is discharged from the homes or from the factories. We have different types of hazardous waste that is put into the river bodies, and religious waste, which comes after many ceremonies and different things, and hospital waste, which can also be called a hazardous waste, which might cause a lot of problems, right? All these things are actually put into the water, and that's what makes water unfit for drinking or even for cleaning or agricultural purposes. And what it leads to the aquatic life dying. Okay, so fishes, etc., whatever aquatic life lives in that river body is actually harmed, they die, right? And moreover, it leads to effects on human health as well, right? So these are certain things. So directly or indirectly, we all are connected, right? We all are connected. So if one part gets affected, all the other parts also see or feel or bear the consequences of these. Okay, so what is pollution or what is water pollution? Very simple. Whenever anything that is harmful is added, okay, that makes the water unfit. For example, adding some kind of mercury that is generated from the paper industry to the water, that makes the water poisonous, right? So how does this leads to the scarcity of water? So all the water that is available now is not fit for drinking, so it again makes the water scarce, right? What will happen if we keep polluting our rivers and lakes? Eventually, there will be no water for use, and every time you need water, you will be needing to get it processed or get it checked, okay, even for drinking. So now, quick questions. Which water body will be affected more, a moving river or a stagnant lake? Take 3 seconds and then we'll discuss why. 3, 2, 1. Well, the stagnant body is going to get more affected. A flowing river is basically moving. So the contaminants or the pollutants are not getting collected at one place. But in a stagnant body, the contaminants are going to get collected or accumulating in the water body. They keep accumulating in the water body, and that's what leads to finally the end of the water body. Okay, so this is about the moving and the stationary water bodies. Then, what do you think, out of the rivers and the rocky regions, which one is going to have more biodiversity or more living organisms? Take again 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. So it's the rivers that are going to have the more biodiversity because they have this very important source, that is water. Okay, and they say that life first originated in water, and life is possible on this earth, which is also known as blue planet, because of the water, right? So now, which climate do you think has more biodiversity? And I'm sure you know the answer. Is it the summers, is it the winters, or is it the monsoon? It's the monsoon again, because of the water, right? So that means the climate also affects the biodiversity, which also brings me to the coastline of our country, India, right? So what do we know about Indian coastline is that the region which is near to the sea has more rainfall. For example, the regions like Kerala, right? They all receive, or these regions which are near Mumbai, Maharashtra, all these regions, they receive much more rainfall, right? And Karnataka as well. And on the other side, that is the eastern coast of the country, also receives the water, right? Because of, for example, the Bengal region, right? So all these areas, because they receive more water, they are much more rich in biodiversity. Okay, so that is something that you should understand, why water is such an important resource for the life. Okay, so now what is water pollution? Addition of undesirable substances. Okay, so whenever there are undesirable substances that are added, that is pollution. It can also be removal or deletion of desirable substances. For example, oxygen. Desirable substances, for example, oxygen. Here we had this example of mercury, Hg is mercury, and change in the consistency or constituents of the water pollution. That means water, that means all the components are present but their composition is varying. Now that also leads to pollution. Okay, so air pollution, similarly, we have the composition of nitrogen, which is usually around 78%. Then we have, but if this changes, then again it leads to pollution. Sulfur, this causes kind of acid rain. So sulfur and nitrogen compounds, when they are, when they are like emitted from the factories, that leads to something known as acid rain. Okay, so yeah. Now these two actually lead to acid rain. Okay, so acid rain is very dangerous as it not only corrodes the buildings and also causes marble cancer, but it is also dangerous for the eyes and for the other systems of a human body. It also leads to smog, which leads to a lot of problems of the air traffic, of the normal traffic, and on the health issues as well. It leads to different types of allergies in your body, and it leads to cancer and heart diseases as well. So that means what all the problems are there that are that can be caused because of the water and air pollution. Both of them are very important and very scoring. Okay, so what all we covered today is we talked about air, we talked about how air and water affects the living condition of a region, how they affect the climate, and then we also discussed about how these places get, how these resources gets misused, how these natural resources are actually getting polluted because of the human activities, right? So I would like you to, think of different ways by which they can be conserved or they can be protected, right? One of the way is through balance and sustainable living. I hope you have learned something new and enjoyed today's session. Thank you so much.